Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today we're going to talk about a place which has been progressive for many years and, a place that was, one might argue in a bunch of regards, on the right track. They led the charge with e-residency and then digital nomad visas, and now they're leading the charge into arguably the wrong direction. So we're going to talk today about some regulatory changes in Estonia related to anti-money laundering and why you may not want to be there, in particular if you're in crypto, which is a place that, frankly, crypto and Estonia went fairly well together up to this point in time. So we're going to dive in. Before we do that, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Appreciate your support. If you'd like help with any of the subjects that we deal with here, please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendar.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so Estonia has implemented, or they're in the process of implementing some new rules. What we call VASP regulations are a part of these, and it's really a series of anti-money laundering protocols that they are bringing in for virtual asset service providers. And these have made it much more expensive to deal with Estonia. We're going to go through some of the prices in a second, as well as imposed much more onerous restrictions. And if you want to understand why banking has become so challenging around the world, it is largely because of rules like this. I think Estonia is completely off base in this. They're going in the totally wrong direction. I've stated previously, anti-money laundering has become far, far worse than money laundering. Statistically, you can look at the stats on it and find that the cost of money laundering is about a factor of 100 greater than the benefits that they get from anti-money laundering. Or sorry, the cost of anti-money laundering is a factor of about 100 greater than the benefits that they get. And so you have basically a whole bunch of policies that are becoming increasingly draconian, increasingly restrictive, make it more and more difficult for an increasingly broad range of the population to do basic things, and they just keep doubling down on that when it's not really working and never really examining the policies. It's extremely stupid, and at some point it's going to break. In my opinion, a bunch of smaller countries need to basically tell the rest of the world to fuck off. And actually, ironically, today the president of El Salvador, the IMF, I believe it was the IMF or World Bank, one of these guys, downgraded El Salvador's bonds because of their Bitcoin trading, and he posted, "El Salvador doesn't give a fuck." So, we'll see how it plays out for them. I mean, maybe it will work well, maybe it won't, but I think it's good that there is some action in that direction, because frankly, if you look at countries like Malta, where it's just impossible to bank, countries like Cyprus that have gone from being pretty welcoming to very restrictive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you find that more and more there are just huge hassles with banking. And this is really a basic lifeline for people. It actually should be made easier and easier, and the opposite is true. And in a world where we talk lots about discrimination and so on and so forth, it's one of the most discriminatory policies, because frankly, you have people who are in places like Africa who are least able to comply with these, and yet most need those types of services. So yeah, really, really messed up. We'll see, hopefully some direction changes on that. But in the meantime, I would say that the desire by, say, the crypto industry to embrace regulations is probably a bad move. Anyway, let's talk about Estonia. So what has Estonia done? With these new regulations, they have done a few things. So first of all, they have raised the licensing costs by a factor of 3 for basic licensing. So it was previously about around 3,000 euros. It's gone up to, it's 11,000 euros now. And in certain circumstances, if you're, for example, talking about being a virtual currency, like sending and receiving, transmitting currencies, then you are going to be hit with much, much higher costs. We've up to as high as a few $100,000, which is pretty crazy. Doesn't make it very compelling at all. Then on top of that, they've increased the minimum share capital by a factor of 10. Okay, so that's a very major increase. again, oh, and then on top of that, as part of the licensing requirements, the share capital, you can have a fee of 1% of the share capital going to the registration bodies. The definition of who is required to do Know Your Client and anti-money laundering procedures has been expanded, so it includes ICO providers. And if it's not a legal entity that's doing it, the responsibility falls on the individuals, making it pretty onerous. If you have a license in the space and some of the share capital is found to have come from some sort of illicit source, or if you're found not to be in compliance with the rules, they will just cancel your license. So you can lose all of that benefit, etc. Basically, they've made it way, way worse. And I suspect what you're going to see, first of all, we'd already seen some move away from Estonia as their banking deteriorated quite a lot, and as they got into a situation where they just kind of clamped down on a lot of inactive companies. By the way, if you're inactive for 6 months, you lose your license, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of criteria that go on here. So makes it, again, onerous, right? The license, just getting the license, by the way, has a whole bunch of criteria that you have to follow through and be approved by them. So not particularly easy in that regard. Why do I think this is happening? In my opinion, what is happening is that Estonia is under quite a lot of pressure from the EU and broader areas. And so they're trying to take the approach of they're going to lead the way of being whiter than white. They should probably do this through embracing RegTech instead of doing things this way. Frankly, the costs are not really that surprising given that, frankly, the policing costs are fairly high. And so, how are you going to fund this huge bureaucracy that's needed to police these things if you don't generate revenue from somewhere? So it's sensible in that regard, but the burden that it places on the businesses, which then trickles down to investors and customers, et cetera, is not good. And so, yeah, just in general, I think it's the wrong move. But this being said, what I would tell you is that if you're even remotely close to that industry, I would probably steer away from Estonia at this stage. They really no longer have significant advantages, unfortunately. And so you're better off probably going elsewhere, seeing as you're not typically going to get a bunch of infrastructure, et cetera, like you would want anyway. And with all this other headache, why bother? So anyway, I hope that helps. If you're interested in the space, you can go and check those out if you're interested in launching an ICO or IDO token, et cetera. If you're in a position where you are interested in, running some sort of exchange or setting up banking or any of these sorts of things, put the comments below, reach out to me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.